Welcome, everyone. My name is Madeline Snow. I think we'll start up. I'm from University of Massachusetts in Lowell, and we really appreciate you spending the time in this third webinar in a series of webinars for food and beverage businesses. We'd like to thank EPA Region 1 for financial support of this effort, UMass Amherst and the Center for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy for their longtime patience and support, and Recycling Works, as well as the Toxics Use Reduction Institute. We're going to only go 45 minutes. So I don't think I've ever been on a Zoom call when somebody said, oh boy, we wish we had taken up another 45 minutes. So we're gonna stop at 1:45 Eastern time. I will stop the recording, and if you would like, we continue the conversation more informally at that point. Next slide, Corianne. I'm just going to do a quick introduction, and these are the additional webinars, and I will put into the chat the registration links. Next slide, please. And I just want to do the pollution prevention hierarchy. And the concept is that while we used to only deal with the disposal aspect of waste, in particular food waste, the idea is you're trying to reduce the amount of waste that you actually generate at the source. So while recycling is wonderful, energy recovery and treatment is wonderful, the key concept in pollution prevention is that you're trying to reduce the actual amount of that you actually generate. Next one, please. So I look at pollution prevention as a business strategy, as a way to reduce or avoid costs, particularly in these challenging times. Next one. And these were the questions that we were trying to get at during this webinar. How can we reduce or contain costs? And we are really talking about organic waste and solid waste, but there are lots of other waste streams which we could do whole other webinar series on just on those. Universal waste, hazardous waste, etc. But also, again, how can we prevent food and solid waste? And how can we actually rescue or divert food waste? Next one. So here are the key takeaways. I'm giving them to you now, and we'll go over them again. Reducing the waste you have to handle, manage, and dispose of can save you time and money, reduce liability, and reduce risk. And as I said before, recycling is great, but does not take the place of source reduction. And waste can be a resource. And finally, look for opportunities to reduce, reuse, and repurpose. Next one. And I think, Corianne, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madeline, for the introduction and for inviting Recycling Works in Massachusetts to speak today. So it's a pleasure to be with you all. My name is Corianne Mansell. I'm the Strategic Services Representative at the Center for Ecotechnology, and I'm here to talk about Recycling Works in Massachusetts and to highlight the importance and value of reducing and recovering wasted food. For a bit of background, Recycling Works in Massachusetts is funded by Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and delivered under contract by the Center for Ecotechnology. Through Recycling Works, we provide free assistance to businesses and institutions that are interested in reducing their waste and maximizing recycling, reuse, and food recovery opportunities. We offer a hotline, an online database of service providers, resources to address common questions and concerns, and then also technical assistance. For some more context around what technical assistance is, it is essentially an opportunity for us to develop customized recommendations for your facility, and it includes a reflection of what we saw when we met, as well as the additional opportunities to prevent, recover, and otherwise divert material. It can be virtual or in person, and so it's really looking at the flow of waste materials at your facility. And even after that report, we do provide that ongoing support to your organization. For those that are out of Massachusetts, due to the success of this program, Center for Ecotechnology is also partnered with entities such as EPA, Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, and many more to help businesses out of Massachusetts. So I encourage you to reach out. If you can launch the first poll. So I am launching a poll right now to evaluate if your facility currently has a waste management plan. And it is in the context of Massachusetts having waste bans. Sorry about that. Massachusetts having waste bans. Specifically, we're talking more about the commercial food waste ban today, but there are other items on that list, including cardboard, plastic containers, and more. And you can end polling. It seems as though we have just about everyone. And so that's good that there's a good number of people that have that waste management in place. However, we have found that we're happy to meet with those that do have plans in place, because there's always opportunities to expand that program and bring in additional resources. And you can also launch the second poll. So also honing in on food waste, we want to see, do you have a plan to reduce or recover your wasted food? And this graphic may look familiar to some of us. It's the US EPA food recovery hierarchy that prioritizes source reduction, then looks to feeding hungry people, looking to anaerobic digestion, and then also composting. Oh, and so that's also great to see that we have about half of the attendees noting that they do have a plan for their food scraps, whether that's unavoidable or potentially unavoidable, either edible or inedible. So it's great to hear that the attendees do have waste management plans in place. Sorry.
Here are the strategies.
Strategies in place, but then why is that? Why are we with these waste management plans? Well, there are a lot of opportunities and reasons to implement them. One is, of course, Massachusetts is not alone. Many other states, cities, and towns have enacted regulatory requirements for businesses to find alternative outlets. Then there's the second opportunity to showcase your environmental commitment as a way to appeal to customers and meet your sustainability goals. Then my mouse pad is very sensitive today, so my apologies. And then, of course, when you're looking to rescuing your edible surplus, it's also building connections between you, your employees, your business, and your local partners. And then last but certainly not least, there's also the opportunity to save you money. Today, I will review some of the highlights and a few of the best management practices that we have developed through Recycling Works. So we have one guidance document on source reduction, we have another on food donation, and we also have another guidance document for source separation. And we develop these because as we're interacting with businesses and service providers, we're hearing those common questions, concerns, and strategies that come up that we want to help and address. So our source reduction guidance document does highlight many of these best practices and can be a clearinghouse for many of the resources that are available to you. And the reason for source reduction, I'd like to note that World Resource Institute found that for every $1 that is invested in source reduction efforts, there is a $14 return on investment. So there it ties into the financial incentive, absolutely. But also, so what is source reduction? Well, planning and getting accurate data is really key to preventing wasted food. It's much easier to say, okay, here's our benchmark goal, once you know how much is ending up in your waste stream. You can utilize tools that are available through the EPA, as well as other source reduction technologies such as food with a pH, lean path, and Winnow. Another component is also looking at your equipment, ensuring that the refrigerated walk-ins and other storing areas are working correctly, so that they lengthen the life of your produce and your ingredients. And then also, maybe more applicable to institutions, is looking at that root to stock cooking. So are you using the entire vegetable? Are you using what's also called the nose to tail cooking? So the entire animal. That helps reduce those food scraps in the back of house. And then when looking at front of house, are there extra garnishes that are frequently coming back to the kitchen, or maybe we have extra French fries that we're noticing. As much as I love a full plate of fries, sometimes there's the opportunity to reduce how many are going out. I like to bring real examples to the conversation. So for instance, there is a chip manufacturer that is sending their potato starch to a makeup manufacturer, that actually the potato starch increases the shelf life of the makeup, which I found really interesting and innovative way to utilize that byproduct that they're seeing. For additional off-spec items, they're also working with an animal feed operation that uses depackaging technology. So that's able to feed animals, but this technology actually takes out if it's a chip bag, so that the animals don't end up with a chip bag as well. There's also the Upcycled Food Association that offers a lot of examples of how businesses are either expanding their revenue streams by creating additional products, or starting additional businesses, or working with local partners. So on the market today, there's avocado pit tea is an example, as well as salmon skin chips. So I'm really excited to try those products. I have not yet, but that's really a good example of how you're building more of that engagement with your customers, because more and more these customers are also looking for those upcycled products. An example from a restaurant that we worked with in Boston, where is also when they were able to notice a tremendous savings after implementing some source reduction strategies. So they noticed that the potato skins from their French fries were actually one of the biggest or largest thing in their trash barrels. So we helped have that conversation around, well, if that's the biggest food scrap that you're ending up with, do you want to continue to peel your potato scrap for your French fries, or just offer them with the peels? And they ended up transitioning to not peeling their potatoes for their French fries, and likely saving over $700 a year on disposal fees. And that's not always going to be the case. It's understandable that you have certain ingredients and certain methods, but maybe the potato chips could go to somebody else, or potato skins to develop into potato chips, and other connections in a similar way. So also, the second best way to avoid wasted food is to establish a donation program. So after ensuring that the food cannot be served, can't be sold or transformed at your own business, you can consider donating the still edible product if it's kept in appropriate conditions. This can fit quite easily into your current operations, and also results in saving potential financial savings, and is a huge win for the community. Most categories of food can be donated. So, but at the same time, something to consider and is highlighted in this slide is the partner organizations that you're working with. They do have, varied products that they can take in. So having that conversation is definitely important. There are also organizations available out there to kind of design food rescue partnerships for you. So I believe one example is Food Donation Connection, that is looking at, okay, if you're a retailer and you have 6 days out of the week that you have donations ready, on Monday this food rescue organization can pick up these products, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. One important note, of course, is any food that looks or smells spoiled should definitely be tossed. And we encourage, when in doubt, you throw it out. But hopefully that's going to, another beneficial use, whether that's animal feed, anaerobic digestion, or composting. However, I did also want to note that there are liability protections for your operations. So the federal Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, Food Donation Act, actually encourages food donation by providing liability protections for businesses that are donating, apparently wholesome food in good faith to nonprofit organizations. So this means if you're treating the food as if you're giving it to a customer, you should have, those protections in mind. And extensive legal research also shows that there hasn't been one single legal case related to food donation liability. Our food donation guidance document refers to these protections, as well as the time and temperature best practices kind of noted on the earlier slide, and then also the tax incentives for donating that edible food. So I just reviewed some of those best practices that are available in our source reduction guidance document and our food donation guidance document, but there's much more in those guidance documents, as well as other resources on our website. Quickly, I wanted to also note the importance of signage, clear and consistent and as tailored as possible to your facility signage. And one part of our technical assistance is also customizing signage for you, whether that's for food donation, recycling, food scraps, really showing those pictures of what's going to be actually generated in your facility. So thank you so much for having me here today. I'm happy to take questions, and for also those attendees that are not in Massachusetts, I still encourage you to connect, send me an email. I'd be happy to evaluate how Center for Ecotechnology can share our resources and our assistance as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Corianne. And we will be sharing both the recording and the resources and contact information. Corianne, can you stop sharing your screen? Next, I would like to ask Karen Collins from Bisou Sweet Confections, and I hope I've pronounced it correctly. But Karen, besides drooling over the pictures of your wonderful products, could you give us an overview of sort of what you've been trying to do, why, and some of the results and challenges?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Karen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So I own a wholesale bakery. If it's loud in the background, it's because I am sitting at my plant in my tiny little office and there's tons of stuff going on. So I apologize in advance. So my company, we make a variety of baked products. We manufacture, package, and freeze them, and we ship them frozen to our customers. And some of our customers are local supermarkets, and we also sell to larger chains like Wegmans and Whole Foods, Market Basket, the Fresh Market. So our product is shipping across the country right now, which is pretty cool and exciting. So we have always had waste, and I used to almost brag to my friends and say, or people in the industry and say, oh, we're a wholesale bakery, so we don't have any waste because everything that we make is filling an order. We don't have that retail case where if the pastries don't sell, we have to figure out and find a home for them the next day. And what I have realized is that I really had no clue what I was talking about, because we did generate waste. It just is that I wasn't looking for it in the right place. And so my biggest learning lesson is that identifying waste starts with awareness. And so coming from a retail background, I was used to looking for that bag of leftover croissants or something like that. And really, once I started taking a look at how we were manufacturing and our different processes and all of that, I saw that there was an incredible amount of waste. So once we identified the waste, I think it's just, you know, it's like a recipe, you know, like you need someone to have energy to want to and to care about it so that you want to fix it or reduce it or do something with it, generate something out of the waste, turn it into good. And for you know, as a business owner, there's a million things going on, and so I didn't really have the energy to put towards it, and so we would make stuff, throw it out, and the cycle went. And so recently, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I was out on the floor in manufacturing and just was baking with my team. And we make biscotti. So we bake these long logs. We have a cutter and it slices it and it generates ends. And so we're suddenly selling tons of biscotti. And now we're generating tons of ends. And they're going in these big plastic bags and we're measuring the waste. So I have everyone weighing it. And it's like 11 pounds, 10 pounds, 7 pounds. And this is daily. And I looked at one of my coworkers, and you know, we try to find homes for them, but again, not a lot of energy towards this. And so she said, "What do you want me to do with them?" And I said, "I guess you should just put in the garbage." And so she put in the garbage, and I saw her roll her eyes and make a face like she was going to, you know, vomit. It was so disgusting to her what we were doing. And it got me. And I realized that not only are we throwing out food that is really good and can be delivered to people in need or turned into something, I'm hurting our morale. And so I started looking into different things that we could do. So for a while, we brought our biscotti ends to a local farm, and they would serve, you know, give it to their animals. And then I recently contacted someone from a local food rescue organization, Loving Spoonfuls, and we are going to package our ends so that they can distribute them. And so this is, you know, just this little bag of ends, and we're tying it with a ribbon, and we're using, I have a graveyard of packaging that I purchased at some point and stopped using. And so we're using up our dead stock packaging material ribbon that we're not using, and we're putting these ends together. And my hope is that, you know, we have this adorable little package that someone's going to receive and feel like they've been given a gift and not like someone's, you know, ends. And so the morale in the business just packaging these has been terrific, because now we all feel good about what we're doing. We're saving space under our tables because those big bags of biscotti are gone. And so the takeaway for me is just that it is really easy to make a 1% improvement in the process. It just takes that awareness, it takes that desire, it takes some energy, and it's infectious. And so, and once you start, like we started with biscotti, and now we're scouring and we're looking everywhere. So, so it's really interesting, but it's, I think it's a lifelong, if you're in this industry, it's something that we have to do, and there's more reason to do it beyond the bottom line, you know, reduce costs and increase your margins. There's more reason. So that's all I got for you.
It's a great story. It's a great story.
Thank you.
I would still buy them personally myself. But that's great.
Cute.
We had a previous speaker from the Plenus Group in Lowell in our first one. And if any of you were on, you might remember that with the production down because of the pandemic, they actually started to use up stock, and they arranged for local donations rather than have it expire, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it made them feel good, and it wasn't a waste of the product that they spend so much time on. With that, could we go to Andrew Haney, and then we can have time, lots of times for questions and answers. Andrew from Spoiler Alert.
Hi, everyone. Just some technical stuff here. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So just by way of introduction, I'd like to actually just plus one a lot of the things that Karen and Corianne were talking about related to thinking about food waste, thinking about mitigating food waste. And then just to Karen's last point, which I thought was just such a direct point of that, creating 1% efficiency or taking that one extra step can really have a meaningful impact. And that's not only from the soft side of the business, but also from an economic side of the business as well. Just by way of introduction to Spoiler, in case anyone has not heard of us, we're a Boston-based company. We work and are backed by some of the largest distribution companies as far as Maersk and other global supply chains. And where we are certainly empowering some of the largest food companies in the world, but this process, which I'll walk through, is relevant to even small bakeries that are working with volumes that are not of the Kraft Heinz's or the Campbell's. And it comes down to mitigating waste and potentially recovering sales, or even moving that food, which is our mission, is to move it out of the dump area and into donation, and potentially, which I'll talk through, that ability to potentially sell that to recover your cost. So there is a bottom line impact of this, that most, if not all, of these businesses down here at the bottom do have a large volume that they are working through just with overproduction. So if you miss a delivery, that's a problem. But if you overproduce to cover that, as we've seen the middle of the country freeze, for example, there's a lot of things that you need to account for that might not be typical. When we think of food waste, we think of it from, on the far left side, we think of from the farm, going all the way into the factories to produce. There's waste that comes there. Going all the way into the storage or the distribution centers. There's some natural waste there with quality assurance or just accidents that happen. And then going into the consumer's home or into the marketplace from a retail standpoint. So where waste can happen is at any one of these or all of these, as I'm sure a lot of the operators here can attest to, but you have to account for that in your production schedule of that distressed inventory that's coming in that has massive impacts across the spectrum. This slide is if you guys are operators, this looks probably easier than some of the drawings that are on walls and whiteboards around, but the key here and takeaway here is from an operator standpoint, and we hear this across a lot of the CPG or consumer packaged goods companies, is that however complicated it is, at the end of the day, there's a percentage or a component to your production that is not going to go to the primary sellers. So whether that's a byproduct of what you have or you're overproducing, and we're talking in this landscape of the finished good products. So what would sit on a shelf in Stop and Shop as a native Bostonian in stores. But the key thing here, to Karen's point of taking the extra time to be able to, within your inventory control system or however you're working through how much inventory you have available to sell to your primary customers, and then everything that's left over. That's that first bucket here of inventory identification. We're not talking about your tier 1, we're talking about everything else. From that pie, identifying today as a baseline of how much you're actually reselling or recovering of any cost, if at all, how much are you donating, and then how much are you dumping? So even just taking that extra step to truly look yourself in the mirror as operators or business owners to understand what is it that we think we're doing that could be improved, but really understanding where the gaps in our process currently are, and then starting to put a plan against it. So whether it's finding donation partners to get to, what I'd like to call attention to is a lot of donation partners actually have money to spend to buy products as well. So not thinking that it's just a pure donation to some do have funding that comes either from their organization, from state and local government, or otherwise. And for them, it's really assuring that they have a good variety of products that they're offering to their community that they're serving. So there is an element to that. These are a very high level numbers, but this is really where it gets from a quantifiable standpoint of the average, or what we're seeing within consumer goods companies is on average of the total that they have of excess finished goods inventory, they're only selling about 48% of that. And then donating 22%, but where we're really zeroed in on is really this dump area of 30% of all product that's coming into the secondary market is finding its way to a landfill. So where we're trying to get people to ask the questions internally is why? Why is it going into a landfill? What is it? What's stopping them from, at the very least, donating to facilities, charities, food banks, whatever the case is? But also that extra step of, is there a location that you could actually sell this to? So a local buyer is like an Ocean State job lot for a lot of finished good products that is here. There's always looking for a variety of products, but it's hard to find buyers. It's hard to get into a conversation with them. It's hard to get them as a partner in the building. But if you do take those steps, you can start mitigating how much you're actually wasting, which is truly our mission, is to reduce food waste as it goes through. And to my point of, there are plenty of landing spots for this. So in our world, we work with over 20,000 brick and mortar locations across the country. So we work nationally. So and I'll use the air quotes, excuse that I can't find a home for it, it's just hard. They're there. I promise you they're there. And these are, the big lots, the Ocean State job lots, the retail locations, but this isn't even taking into account the donation locations that are there, the food banks or other locations across the country, Feeding America and others. There are places for your product irrelevant of shelf life. And we work with Danone, who has yogurts and milk, so dairy, which has a very quick shelf life, or as we'll see here in a minute, Campbell Soup, which has more of a 4-6 month shelf life, where products are going to donations and others. So the fact is that Campbell Soup, and when you think canned soup, I'm sure you're not thinking, well, they must be able to give away everything. It's canned soup. Like, A, who doesn't want that? And B, it has a forever shelf life. So where's the problem? So this is a public case study that we did with Campbell Soup, where before we started working with them, they thought they were doing very well. They had a process in place, they had good people in place, but they were only selling about 38% of what was coming into that secondary market, meaning the remaining 62% was actually going over into a donation and dump. The next assumption, incorrectly, you would think, is that, well, they must donate most of it. Well, they weren't. They were actually donating only 35% of it, meaning they were throwing away 62% of what was coming into, and this is canned soup. So there's an element of this of, if there's improvement for them, there's improvement for basically anyone. So this isn't something that has, this isn't lettuce that has a 2-day shelf life or a 2-day turnaround time. This is really some shelf stable food that can come through. And the work that we did with them was really to help identify, A, why aren't they able to sell their top line and really move the needle on that 38% that was going through? Was it a matter of they didn't have enough landing spots for it, or that they didn't have enough donation partners for it? Like, where were the gaps in that? So we started to have, an uncomfortable conversation in the building about where their gaps were, which really forced a lot of great conversations that went all the way up through to their CEO about what their corporate strategy was. And then tangibly, for finished good products where there was such a potential for them, how could they improve at an organizational level? A, frankly, bottom line return on investment, but B, most importantly, how do they improve what they were donating? After a very short period of time of working with them, working through their process, they were now donating over 65% of what was coming over that they weren't able to sell. But most importantly, they were able to find homes for about 74% of their process, which in their case, we're talking millions of dollars of switches here. But these percentages work whether you're a multi-billion-dollar company or if you're smaller in ranges. But the key takeaway is that you got to know where you're starting from, because then you can start chipping away at the process that you're going through. We also work with food distributors. So we have KeHE, we have HelloFresh is another great partner of ours. And I mentioned them because the strategies are very different. So HelloFresh has a strategy that anything they're not selling, they're 100% want to donate. They are not looking to recover any cost on that. So for them, for HelloFresh, they just needed more partners identified, help move that product through because it does have only a couple weeks left of shelf life. So again, even if it's lettuce or anything that's perishable, there is a home for it. It's just that extra step of finding that home for it. Because yes, it is easier to throw it away, but there's a cost to use, a cost to environment. At the very least, you should be composting that, but there could be and should be homes for products. With KeHE, you know, they're a distributor, so they sell multiple people's products all across. We just put a process in place. So we start to identify, is it seasonally that you have products that are coming through? So again, working with firms on identifying a baseline of where are you today, as anyone can do within their business. As Karen pointed out, you know, she thought she was doing very well, but then found out there was other areas. So there could be an ingredient component that you're burning. There could be, you know, a byproduct of your production process is where your biggest burn is. As Corinne was saying, like, you know, just peels of a potato. So there are areas where that byproduct could be useful to someone else, which clears it away from a landfill that could recover any cost or even not that you're donating it to another firm who could benefit from those products. But it is certainly time, energy, and effort, which a lot of small businesses just don't have. There's only so many times in the day and there's only so many hats that one can wear. But what we're finding with smaller organizations is that it's at least a portion of some people's time. And they're dedicating some portion of their week towards that time and setting very reasonable goals that are not, you know, aspirational in nature that can never be obtained. But hey, we're going to find 3 more partners. We're going to find 1 more partner in this region where we're seeing the highest waste. But the biggest takeaway is it all starts with how are you doing today and taking a real hard look at it. A lot of the bigger firms we talk to, this is a very sensitive topic for them because this is identifying that they have waste in their product. And at their scope and scale, it's pretty significant. That certainly no stock owner wants to hear of millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of product that is going into a secondary market with potential for waste. So bigger firms are addressing this across sustainability. They have dedicated people for this. CEOs are putting this into their own KPIs, not only from a CO2 emissions dropping, but this is something that every firm overproduces to cover their liability for a delivery side of it. The question simply is, how close can I get this distribution? But most importantly, if and when I have problems, can I find homes for these problems? And they're starting to have dedicated resources for that, which frankly is a benefit to us, but it's really a telling tale where firms of any size we're finding have folks that are very personally vested in the success of this program. And there's certainly tools and people out there that can help with that as well. That's all I had. I was asked to keep it nice and tight. So I will happy to answer any questions or field any thoughts. But Corianne, thank you very much for the invite as well, as Madeline as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, if you could stop share, and then I'm just going to open it up for questions for Karen and Andy and for Corianne. And there aren't that many of us, so I think that we can manage ourselves. And if you have a question, just unmute yourself and go for it. And I would love to hear, you know, how the things that they've been talking about actually affect your thinking about your own processes. Let's just open it up.
Have any of you worked with a federal facility I know donations at federal facilities is very tricky.
Yes, we, when you say federal facility, actually, no, I think it's more state facilities we've worked with in Massachusetts, in Philadelphia, and also in Connecticut to implement food rescue programs. And with that, you know, their legal departments relied on the liability protections that were applicable for their state, including the bill, of course, the federal Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, and then also some states have additional protections beyond that.
Thanks, Rachel.
So to answer the question in the chat, sure, I would be happy to share a copy of the PowerPoint if you're looking for Recycling Works, and I won't speak for Andrew. However, we're also more than happy to talk offline about your particular interest and see if we can help you implement a program.
Great.
Happy to.
I must say I've been to several conferences where all the focus was on food donations. And there was no discussion, again, about how do you actually reduce the amount of waste that you're actually creating. And I just want to continuously bring that in because it's as important. It may not be as interesting, but from a business perspective, it's absolutely crucial.
So I will say that when all of these things that we're talking about just take time and energy and effort. And as people in this industry, we have to, I feel strongly for me that I care about this stuff. And so I, you know, feel like we have to care enough to put some time and some energy and some effort towards it. And so for example, when we were first making biscotti, we, you know, were extruding logs that didn't go from end to end on our pan. And then when we ran it through the slicer, we had enormous amount of waste. And just by tweaking the length of each log that we extruded, we were able to reduce the waste instead of, you know, by 4x or more. And so something as simple as just like every time, you know, I guess my challenge for myself and my team and for everyone here is like every time I walk through the manufacturing plant, it's like, well, could we do that differently? Could we, how do we end up doing it this way? And what if we tried, like, what if we just tried something different? And I get a lot of heat because, you know, sometimes it's just nice if, you know, I stay in my office and I don't mess with people and what they're doing, but then we mess with something and all of a sudden it's like we make this massive gain. And so I like status quo and I don't like it. So I think it's fun to just try to always brainstorm how could we do this differently. So
Karen, I would applaud you and encourage you to keep having those uncomfortable conversations. It's part of running a business, but you know, for us, we started our journey with donations only, and oddly enough, the food manufacturers, you know, frankly, we're just not willing to pay to give away food for free, or get better at giving away food for free. So they asked us to come upstream into what they were able to sell. Come to find out, though, the issues within these organizations was end to end. And some was in the manufacturing process. A lot of it was in the logistics and supply chain process, the demand and supply forecasting, which is as much of an art as it is a science in any regard. We've had some folks who say for the next 18 months through COVID and post-COVID, we're flying blind. So as far as how much we're supposed to produce and how much consumers are taking based on consumers' new consumption patterns is a guessing game. And these are some of the best and brightest people in the industry that it is not, there's no exact science because of all of the, as you know better than probably myself included, is there's just things you can't account for. And it just is what it is. So you can't get caught short. So unfortunately, everyone is overproducing, which unfortunately is producing a lot of waste. And just having systems and process in place, or keep pushing the envelope internally to see where you can cut as much that you can control, because things will always happen externally. But if you are not running efficiency internally, it only exacerbates the problem when external issues occur.
Other questions or insights from your own facilities, particularly about questioning the status quo, which has been a theme in our previous webinars? Like, why is that piece of machinery on? Well, it was on when I got here. It'll be on when I retire. Why are we using that particular cleaning product? I don't know, because that's what the vendor tells us to do. So again, this issue of status quo and questioning, and then therefore improving on how you actually operate. But I'd love to hear from other companies, either questions or reflections of your own business insight.
Hi, this is Dick. I have a question looking at it from the food prep side. So we'll bring in the raw materials from various vendors. We'll have the food prep group prepare it, cook it, and then serve it. And so do any of you look at that aspect of it? I mean, I could see where you're working further up chain, looking at reduction in losses and then donations. And in our process, we would have some food waste, but we'd also have, depending on the facility, would have donation programs, mulching programs, and other types of waste recovery as opposed to waste disposal where we can. But I'm looking to see if you guys have any expertise in those areas.
Yeah, our assistance helps businesses and institutions, of all sides, all sectors, all sizes, and then also wherever their interests lie. Anything that's going in the trash, we'd like to find another home for. So that also includes working with, institutions that are working with vendors that are procuring, product that's coming in a box, and having those conversations as well. Because ultimately, when you're getting that product, then you have to handle it as well. So how can we help with those conversations to ensure that your vendor is on board with your sustainability goals and waste reduction efforts? And then also, not necessarily, we're not going to come into a kitchen and say, this is how you need to be, cutting your vegetables. However, we do have, resources that we can point to that talk about, how can we be utilizing more of the product, the produce or whatever it may be. And then, the front of house, back of house, where we're always going to be following the material and pinpointing areas where it doesn't need to be going in the trash.
So would we contact Corianne or Madeline?
You can contact me, yeah. Either of us, you'll end up with the other maybe. So feel free, I can put my email and our contact information in the chat. I'm happy to have those conversations because, we also understand that we have these best practices, but we will really want to have one-on-one conversations because every facility has their own unique, operations.
Okay, and an educational portion could be used throughout the system once we identify certain practices that could be helpful for all facilities.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. We call it the train the trainer, ensuring those conversations, everyone's on board. We've helped retail grocery stores implement training programs, understanding that sometimes there's turnover. And when you're on board as an onboarding process, understanding, okay, from day one, we have a food donation program and this is how it works. We have a source separation program and this is how it works.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or insights?
I actually have a question. So with our program, we are basically actually going to be hosting a webinar that we're going to be recruiting different businesses in the Pittsburgh area and actually perform an audit process to look where we can reduce waste in like water, energy, different things like that. With the program of donations, do you also look for in the businesses ways to like sanitize the food and reuse it like on the line, things like that? Or is that just like a case by case thing? I don't know if I'm wording that very well. I apologize.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll try and address the question around, you know, food recovery programs and food donation programs. There are best practices for ensuring that it's still safe and of good quality to go out again to food rescue organizations and feeding our communities. I'm not sure about, you know, the food that goes out and then comes back and sanitizing it. We really try and rely on the food that has not seen a customer quite yet. You know, it's the extra trays of fried chicken that never made it to the buffet line. They stayed at that temperature that was needed and required. And now if it's going to a food rescue organization, it's still of that proper temperature and unopened. And likewise with packaged sandwiches and those types of products, we really want to make sure that it hasn't been, it's of the best quality. And so if there's particular questions to, I think you're from the university, I'd also be happy to have those, you know, case by case conversations. And also Pennsylvania has legal fact sheets developed by Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, one being liability protections that also outline some Pennsylvania specific considerations.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? I've put in the chat the registration links for the next 3 webinars. One will be on energy in July, water in August, and sort of communicating results in September. With that, I'm going to launch one more poll, and then I'm going to shut the recording off. I'm going to before that, I'm going to thank everything. And the webinar recordings will be sent to everybody. So I'll send you the recordings and additional information in terms of resources. But here's my last poll, really fast. Was this worth your time? And thank you, Lauren, for including that. Will be posted on UMass Amherst website as well. Thank you. So, you know, you're supposed to stop the polling when it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to stop it. How's that? Here's our results. So we were okay. And I want to thank you all for coming back for another webinar. I want to thank Corianne and Andrew and Karen in particular, taking time from her business to share some of her insights and experiences with us. With that, I'm going to actually stop the recording, but I'm going to